Welcome to the Empowerment Series. This series is meant to empower parents of children with cerebral palsy to engage in effective advocacy campaign. Today we are talking about how to run an effective advocacy campaign on cerebral palsy. Many parents have expressed desire to join in this advocacy, but have also expressed the need to be trained in what can be said during an advocacy campaign. This video will do just that. I'll attempt to explain what is involved in advocacy, how we could do advocacy effectively on cerebral palsy and its related issues. So, for the first step, I'll say that when you are running an advocacy campaign, you need to situate it within a global context. Um, what global context am I talking about? We are all talking about the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And cerebral palsy obviously fits into it because some of the goals include reducing or alleviating poverty, access to quality healthcare, and then equity. We all know that raising a child with cerebral palsy can let you be within these circles poverty, lack of access to quality health, and then you can lack equity. So, we situate this whole cerebral palsy advocacy campaign within this global context. And this context also fits into the national context. So usually, if there's a national policy on cerebral palsy, that is, if it's some exist in Ghana and in other countries, it's usually fit within these contexts. And so we want to be sure that whatever we are talking about is in line with the sustainable development goals. The next step we need to learn is that we have to be clear on which areas we want to advocate in. We cannot do all. That's why we need a lot of hands on deck. But there are three main areas that I would like to talk about. There's education, there's health, then there's social inclusion. When we talk about education, we are talking about inclusive education. We are lucky Ghana have an inclusive education policy. But even within the inclusive education policy, we can divide it into two: early childhood development and the primary to JSS. In Ghana, the early childhood development, that is the daycare centers and the creches, fall under the Department of Social Welfare. They license such institutions to operate, while the Ghana Education Service oversees the operations of the primary to GHS. So there's a disconnect. So what are the issues you want to, for instance, address in the educational setup? Example, I am calling for on the Department of Social Welfare to make it binding for early childhood development centers to commit to accepting children with mild to moderate cerebral palsy in their establishments, within their establishment. I believe that that will reduce the number of children that are kept home, and that makes their parents also stay home just to take care of them because they don't have any access to early childhood development centers or schools. When we come to health, I'm talking about inclusive health, and I mean understanding of the healthcare professional in handling children with cerebral palsy vis-a-vis what the parents' voice is in terms of healthcare. So I'll give a very common example. Our children do get seizures. In Ghana, I've checked with the standard treatment guidelines, and I know that when a child gets a seizure or convulsion, one of the first steps is for them to administer malaria treatment after stabilizing the child with diazepam. So, for instance, when you take your child to the hospital with a seizure, the first thing they do is usually to give a rectal diazepam and then start malaria treatment. If you go today, um, they'll do that. You do a full blood count, you do a malaria test, and then to ascertain, Aram, could you please stop? To ascertain whether there's any infection or whatever. We also know that children with cerebral palsy are prone to seizures. Um, but almost every health facility you get into will let you do some of these tests. If your child got a seizure today and the next week the child got a seizure, you do these tests. That is if you go to different hospitals. Sometimes I think that health professionals, clinicians need to listen to the parents' voice in administering healthcare because it will make it more effective. Especially when we are in a context where sometimes the parents that not have money to pay and the parent cannot afford anticonvulsants, the expensive anticonvulsants that are prescribed to the children most of the time. So if you are advocating in the area of healthcare, these are some of the issues that you may want to consider. Um, and then we come to social inclusion. How is inclusion generally in Ghana, which calls for a lot of awareness campaign um, on cerebral palsy. So we can talk about inclusion in churches, inclusion in public places, parks, and other things. How have we as a country adapted to see children with cerebral palsy and obviously their families? Also, if you're a parent and you get an opportunity to speak to the media, or these days with the advent of social media, you are able to post a lot of things online that kind of talk about your feelings. But do not speak to attract pity. You get pitied when you attract pity. And also, let me say that do not nag. Do not nag. There are many people who take to social media to possibly insult government or say they want to get out of the country or whatever because they have a child with cerebral palsy and there are no policies. But I've heard parents from other developed countries also complain about the same kind of hardships that we go through. So why do we want to go nagging every time without providing any solution or suggestion to the government what the government can do? So I ask parents one of those questions when they come to me that they want to do advocacy. I ask them, what do you have in your hands? Yes, I say, what do you have in your hands? Aram is doing that and go and see her. What do you have in your hands? What can you do to help yourself as a parent raising a child with cerebral palsy? Yes, I say, sorry, my children are here and they are interacting with me. Hi, yes, I say, go and take it. Nobody wants to help someone who is totally helpless. You know, it's only when you are helping yourself that you can attract help. So let's look at that. Let's look at that. People will often answer when asked what the government can do for them that, oh, we want government to give us money. And they are not even specific in terms of what exactly they want the money for from government. Yes, money is key when you are raising a child with special needs. But um, when you are raising a child with special needs, but you need to be specific what exactly you want to use the money for. And we all know that people giving us handouts does not solve the issues. So we are calling for effective policies and then we help to implement some of those policies that are already there by holding the authorities to task. So I keep saying that a parent have a role to play in the effective implementation of any policy that exists. I also say that be ready to fight the bureaucracy in the system. I'll give an example. The Special Mothers Project adopted a facility, a school system within the government school system at Medina. There's a place called Medina. And when we wanted to bring in the media to cover the situation of the school, sorry, the children are all over here. To cover the situation of the school, to bring government attention to it, one of the first things we got was threats. Don't bring in the media. We know that the school situation is not the best, but we don't want to deal with the media. So we had to fight some of these things. You cannot please everybody when you are doing advocacy. You cannot please everybody when you are doing advocacy. So you don't have to seek to do that. Also, don't just ask for money like from government. We know money is needed in taking care of the children, but what specifically do you want the money for? Do we want to call for effective systems that enables you, the parent, to work, kind of, so that you do not become a beggar, in quotes, or you just want to ask for pittance from the government? We need to be clear on exactly what we want to ask from government. Some parents say that government should give us money because we have children with the condition. We know in a country like Ghana that will not work. And so let's tackle the low hanging fruits. So can we, for instance, call for a concrete data, let's say on families that are raising children with cerebral palsy? Can we start by asking that government commissions some kind of study into how many families exist that have children with cerebral palsy? Having data will be the first step to help government in terms of planning. So we can think around that when we are doing advocacy. And then I keep saying to parents that do not be overly emotional. Otherwise, you just be brushed off. People will just tag you. Even for me, I've been tagged as emotional, but I know I'm never emotional when I'm talking about cerebral palsy. So many parents go on air, media, and go to cry or lament. They'll just brush you off. But know what you are talking about. Know your stuff before going out there. So we need to work on our minds that having a child with cerebral palsy is not the worst thing that can happen to you, and it's not the end of life. You need to learn to embrace the situation. In Ghana, one of the things that the Special Mothers Project is doing is to encourage the establishment of a network of support systems and services by parents to help enhance our own lives. It is only when we are doing this effectively that we are better placed to hold government accountable to what has been done and what has not been done. You can follow me on YouTube and watch other videos that have been done. We also have a Facebook page, Special Mothers Project in Ghana, Twitter, LinkedIn, search for Hannah Waji or Special Mothers. Thank you for listening. Hope it's been beneficial. Bye.